I wanted to do a video that expands on what we were talking about yesterday. And that is, and actually I think this video is more important than the one I did yesterday, but it's going to be hard to, I'll put a link to the one I did yesterday at the end of this video, just so if you want to go back to it, you can. We talked yesterday about the recent transits that Venus has made, the fact that Venus has just entered Gemini and may still very much be in that 0 to 1 degree of Gemini, where the last Mercury cycle began. And we also talked about the fact that starting today, if you want to look at it that way, the rest of, between now and I would say July the 6th or so, the week before June the 30th, the week after June the 30th, as being important weeks as far as the Taurus new moon solar eclipse on April 30th was concerned. And we talked about the fact that April 30th, June the 30th, September the 8th, and November the 8th would be important dates for the Taurus eclipses. April 30th would be the Taurus solar eclipse, November the 8th would be the Taurus lunar eclipse. The Taurus lunar eclipse, interestingly, always seems to have some sort of an interesting role to play with the US presidential elections. At least the past couple of times, as I've noticed, that tends to be around when the elections occur, results are announced. It's kind of fascinating in that regard. Well, I should say the Taurus full moon, because not every full moon is an eclipse, but irrespective. But that little tidbit out of the way. We talked about the fact that these Venus transits, specifically Venus's conjunction with Uranus, the North Node, and then the square to Saturn and the trine to Pluto over the past 3.5 weeks. And as Venus starts to enter Gemini and is very much right now tracing and traveling through the degrees that were affected by the Mercury retrograde, the last Mercury retrograde in Gemini and Taurus, and has just landed, as we said, in that first degree of Gemini, that it's very likely that self-worth and a resurgence of self-worth and a taking self-worth up to the next level plays an important role in the next couple of weeks as we evaluate and take stock of where things are at related to the Taurus part of our chart, especially in the Taurus eclipses. Energies that came into play between September 19th and November 19th of 2021. November 19th being the first of this set of Taurus eclipses that occurred. And there have been developments since then, including 2 Mercury retrogrades. Because we're talking about Venus and because we're talking about self-worth, I want to clear up a kind of misunderstanding. We're living in an age where boundary setting is one of the talks of the time. Very much part of the zeitgeist to talk in terms of who's a narcissist, who's an empath, where boundaries need to be set, who is a people pleaser, who is a taker. And there's a lot of talk sort of culturally on social media and in general around putting boundaries in place and leaving people or not tolerating certain things and standing up for oneself and where should the bar be placed, etc. And all of that makes sense. I find this video is really relevant also because we have the eclipse, North Node eclipses in Taurus and the South Node eclipses in Scorpio. And archetypally, when we just look at the signs in which these eclipses are happening, these are fundamentally eclipses of independence and self-worth, releasing codependency and intense codependent relationships, or codependent patterns, I should say, and finding our own sense of self-worth and independence. Now, if you have North Node in Taurus or in the second house, these are lessons that are presented to you for this lifetime. But for now, one could argue that, till the end of next year, 2023, this theme continues to play out archetypally insofar as the North Node eclipses in Taurus and the South Node eclipses in Scorpio. I find that when we talk about boundary setting as an expression of a newfound sense of self-worth, I have to tell you, though, I find that when we look at the signs of Taurus and Scorpio, and specifically the planets Venus and Mars, I find that a lot of boundary setting occurs in a scorpionic way, appears consistent with the energy of Mars, not consistent with the energy of Venus and Taurus. The energy of Venus and Taurus is a lot more about finding our individual security and acting from a place of security and acting from a place of peace and flow, and even, one could argue, passivity. When we're in a place, I find that I really find this a lot, especially when people who have a Taurus North Node or second house North Node, and especially when they're going through the kind of sort of North Node midlife crisis in their 40s and beyond, I find that a lot of their activities about moving in what is the right direction for them becomes tied up into scorpionic or 8th house energies, where the drawing of boundaries gets very tied up in anger and resentment and calculation and the weighing and the analysis of other people and the constant measuring of how other people are measuring up, and the involvement in other people's lives continues, and there's this constant processing of, I have to set a boundary, oh, I'm being used, am I not being used? And somewhere the zeitgeist of the time, especially on this kind of narcissist empath thing, I think we lose sight of the fact that we all embody certain qualities. We all are capable of selfishness and selflessness. We are all capable of acting narcissistically at times and empathically at times. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have a pronounced direction in which we go. That doesn't mean, and especially looking at our upbringings and what we've inherited from, I like to say we're all surviving our parents, and they're surviving theirs. And I don't mean just literally in terms of mortality. I just think that it's a cycle that gets passed out. I find the people I find truly scary are those who don't seem to be doing that, who seem to be so enamored of their parents that they feel that there's nothing to survive. And I look at them and I interact with them and I think, oh gosh, when what needs to be, when are you going to get clued in? But as I said, it's sort of a cycle. It's sort of an archetypal thing that we're all here to do. And especially when it comes to our North Node work, you really have to look at issues related to early childhood and soul contracts and how obstacles and encouragements are played out by people in your life, especially in the early part of your life, in terms of those who encourage certain things and those who discourage certain things, or a combination of both, or however that occurs. My concern after yesterday's videos and self-worth was that it would give rise to what I think are energies that are incorrect, and more in, it was a Venus-related video. And from a Venus, when it comes to setting boundaries in a Venusian and a Taurian way, it is a much more quiet, polite, straightforward, firm and stubborn. I mean, we are talking Taurus here, but it does not carry a great deal of angst. It just is. It just is a kind of accordance or acting in accordance with one's authenticity. And it is much more secure and less violent. I find that a lot of boundary setting that occurs has a very Mars male energy. It's much more emotional. And isn't it funny, because Venus is the feminine planet, and yet I find that archetypally it's the signs associated with Mars, the planet Mars, and the signs associated with Mars, Aries and Scorpio, that manifest a great deal of direct emotion and aggression. Whereas when you look at the Venus-related signs, Taurus and Libra, they're much more about chill out, slow and steady, balance, courtliness. I'm not saying that these energies don't have their negative side, with Taurus kind of inaction or laziness or stupor, and in the terms of Libra, a kind of a courtliness and politeness that becomes fake, you know, where the truth is not being told at all, and there's so much diplomacy going on that everything is just kind of, it goes into a kind of slickness. But because we're talking about tapping into one's sense of self-esteem and self-worth, there's a kind of the feminine archetype of Venus. It's much more grounded, much less desperate, much less argumentative, much less finger pointy, much more matter of fact, much more peaceful in the implementation of this self-worth quantum leap that is bubbling within us right now astrologically, and in the way that it will be. It could build bridges. It could wish yourself and others peace. It could allow you to go after what is right for you and what feels right for you in a way that is not quite so anguished as the boundary-setting dialogue of the time, 2022, which has a much more Martian, Scorpionic, Aries flavor to it. And as I said, I find that because the South Node keeps so clever, you know, it keeps sucking us back in. It's like this whirlpool, so that even if you're trying to act towards your North Node, it finds clever ways of getting you back in. So even when I look at people whose charts have either a Taurus or a second house North Node, and it is consistent with the energies of this eclipse cycle because the North Node is in Taurus, one trap to avoid would be that it's about getting in touch with how you value yourself. And that helps you determine not only what you are willing to tolerate and not tolerate, but more importantly, what you are inviting in moving forward. And as I said, it may create a void, I said yesterday, because as you start to reject things that are manifesting, to use a very 2022 word, or on their way to come to you based on an old way of valuing yourself and self-worth, and you're switching to a new way, a new agreement that you are having with yourself with regard to how you're going to be and how you're going to act, there could be a certain period of time between when the old is retired and the new has a chance to come in. So you could experience a certain amount of, to use another Venusian word, poverty or lack as you switch, because you are saying you're emptying the table, you're creating that kind of blank slate, and the new stuff then has to come in accordance with your new set of beliefs, your new set of whatever it is that Venus is, whatever it is that you've been going through with this Venus and Taurus cycle that has just occurred. And Venus, as it goes through Gemini initially, is going to go over the degrees that Mercury was retrograde. And Venus, as it goes through Gemini, a sign that is important for this year, at least for the next 3 odd weeks, will try to create opportunities for agreements and contracts and handshakes and compromises, perhaps, and financial opportunities, relationship opportunities. We'll try and smooth things through. We'll try and bring a gentler flavor. We'll try and grace us with her presence in this part of a chart. And as she begins to do so, I really, when it comes to things like compromises, I think it is important that those compromises are authentic, because if you say yes when you mean no, or if you say no when you mean yes, sooner or later that will create a response or a reaction, and sooner or later something will get broken there because it is not authentic. But if you're able to determine whether you are saying yes or saying no in a way that is consistent with the way that you have chosen to, whether it's a conscious decision or it's happening subconsciously, value yourself moving forward, which basically also affects directly what you're going to commit to financially, in terms of employment, in terms of your relationships, in terms of the way you allow others to treat you, in terms of the way you decide to treat others. Somewhere, when it comes to valuing ourselves, authenticity is not that far behind. Are you valuing yourself too much? Are you valuing yourself too little? Most of us tend to, often we tend to err on the, this is coming up for you on the too little side, because that's where you really start to feel it and feel the need to revise. But it could go the other way as well. the bottom line here is I really want to urge you to consider, with this newfound sense of self-worth that has been developing and brewing, to consider moving forward in a more Venusian way that is fundamentally more embodied, more conscious in the way she takes action, and more concerned with creating a sense of peace and balance and harmony, but not at a compromise to herself. So it's just a no is a no, a yes is a yes, and I'm interested is an I'm interested, is an I'm not interested, is an I'm not interested. Thank you so much. You know, I think I'm going to go this way. You know what? I think I'm going to leave you to figure this out. I think it does not have to be a panic-stricken, constant weighing of, am I being taken advantage of? Is a kind of boundary setting that is not really a boundary setting, that gets stuck in these scorpionic loops of enmeshment and fear and paranoia and power dynamics and over-involvement. From a Taurian sense, you would know what your goals are, what you're trying to get to, what you're trying to manifest in terms of relationships, in terms of finances, in terms of abundance, in terms of your own sustainability. You would recognize that there's a flow to things, so connecting to a more natural rhythm and natural flow, and not necessarily trying to force things, and coming from a place of letting that self-worth inform how you interact with others in a firm, respectful, polite, courtly, even humorous, even constructive, non-Mars, here's where I'm going to set the boundary, here's where I'm going to, you know. And if someone is coming to you, because if you've been saying yes in a certain way, especially to certain people, and all of a sudden they're hearing no, they may choose to ignore you, they may choose to, then you've got to figure out how it, you know, do you engage? Do you just decide to disengage if you've tried and someone is not getting the message? Now, with Venus, things can become overly passive, and it's not as if we don't need the Mars energy. We do. And Mars is going to come into Taurus on July the 5th to help us out in a slightly tortured way, because Mars is going to be tortured in Taurus. And, it, you know, but after yesterday's video, I just had this uneasy feeling that when I was talking about self-worth and Venus, somehow for some of us it would tie into or correlate with behaviors that are more Martian, insofar as the boundary setting is much more direct, assertive, even aggressive, angry, frustrated, emotional. Whereas with Venus, the feminine archetype, it's much more self-possessed, even polite, even courtly, even, you know, I've thought about this, but it's just not for me. And I get that was, you know, but I'm just gonna, this is where I'm at. And I would appreciate it if you don't push me further. You know, it's with Venus, always think about going to your favorite park and sitting under a favorite tree and just watching how things happen. The grass grows, the flowers bloom, the water flows, the trees seem to communicate with each other, and there's just this flow and steady abundance that is rooted in Mother Earth, and it's all here. And yes, it needs Mars energy to cultivate and to meet our goals. But right now, when we're talking about finding self-worth and that having a kind of recently, over the past couple of weeks, maybe getting to a place where we have gotten in touch with what makes us uncomfortable, what doesn't make us uncomfortable, and how we want to align with the way we're going to be valuing ourselves, and how we're going to especially carry that out in the next 2 weeks, and how we see that impact. Have we been saying yes when we mean no? Have we been saying no when we mean yes? Have we been indirect? Have we been manipulative? Have we been, and it's interesting, these archetypes are often associated with Venus, and they can be when Venus becomes so passive that she's not telling the truth. But this energy is about being in alignment with how you would like to value yourself moving forward, and coming from a place of security, not insecurity. And what does that look like? And what does that feel like? And what does that alignment look like? And when you act from there, in terms of setting boundaries and going after the opportunities that you feel you'd like to go after, and not going after things, opportunities or people that you don't want to go after or attract anymore, then coming from that secure place, how does it affect your actions, your speech, your conduct, your deportment, as opposed to insecurity or fear of boundaries being violated or something along those lines. Sorry, that's my cat who's, I don't know if you can hear this whining sound. He's sleeping and he's dreaming, so he's making these funny sounds. When you come from a place of insecurity when it comes to boundary setting, it has an aggression to it that kind of keeps you in a scorpionic loop, okay? And this is not about that. This is about truly feeling like you have found yourself, and you can act from there, and you can engage with others and see where they're coming from, and then determine how you want to move forward. But there's an opportunity to do it in a more harmonious, constructive way. So let's see where that leads us over the next couple of weeks before Mars comes into Taurus. Okay. If you like this, found this useful, feel free to share it, tell your friends about it, whoever, whatever. Feel free to leave a comment or like the video. It tends to drive traffic on YouTube. And please feel free to subscribe to my channel and click on the bell icon to be notified whenever I do new videos if you found this video or other videos useful or helpful. I will leave it at that and be back soon. Thanks.